أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد. فرض العين وفرض الكفاية. This will be the topic of our lesson today, inshallah. So far we have finished one text covering the basics of the etiquettes of seeking knowledge and the principles which we need to hold fast onto to reap the most amount of benefit from this journey, especially when it comes to the akhirah, as to how much we gain as a result of our ephemeral lives in this world. How much we gain at the end of it in the akhirah, it's entirely dependent on what we make of this life. Yes, and so it's for that reason that first text was very important, right? It was very important. We went through a lot of important subjects in that text, which talked about our general lives as productive Muslims, right? And طلب العلم, as students of knowledge, بإذن تعالى, from cleansing our hearts of any shahawat and shubuhat and being sincere, not wasting our time, respecting our teachers, how to behave with them, how to respect the books, and so on and so forth. All of those things were covered, right? So now that we are clear on somewhat of our journey ahead, we need to start the journey. Yes, we need to take our first step. So today's lesson, inshallah, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, will be that first step. Why do we start with this topic of fardul ayn wa fardul kifaya? طيب. We'll look into the technical meanings, the definitions and examples of each of these. These are two types of obligations that we have as Muslims. But before we get there, we have to link it back to the purpose of our creation. Everything is connected to Tawheed, yes? So if we are indeed going to take our first step on this journey, we must start there, Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. Sahih? So, as we all know, Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. طيب? That I have not created men and jinn except that they may worship me, right? That they may worship me. So, if the purpose of our creation is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone, not associate any partners with Him in any shape or form, neither in His, not in His rububiyyah, and not in His uluhiyyah, and neither in His asma wa sifat. So not in the lordship of Allah, Allah being the creator, Allah being the sustainer, Allah being the king of all creation. So we don't associate any partners with Allah in that. طيب. When it comes to then submitting ourselves in obedience to that creator, that king, the only king, Azza wa Jal, we then don't associate partners with him in the acts of obedience. So the acts of obedience which are solely reserved for Allah, we don't include anyone else. We don't direct those acts of worship towards anyone else other than Allah Azza wa Jal. And then when it comes to the names and attributes, understanding who Allah is, having that personal relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, knowing who Allah is, we know anyone through their names and attributes, yes? You know someone's name, you like that name, right? And then you feel that connection, that you want to perhaps know them a bit more, and then you learn about their, actions, traits, characteristics. You learn about someone, that someone is, mashallah, he gives a lot of charity, perhaps, and perhaps someone is very, very nice to their family. Perhaps someone is very, very gentle with the poor. He's very caring for the needy. These are all traits, right? So you learn about someone and then you somewhat grow close to them and you start to love that person for the sake of Allah. Yes, the same. This is psychology. This is plain psychology, right? That you love someone because of your knowledge about them, right? The more you know about them, the more you love them, depending on, of course, their positive characteristics. But if the person does not have any, then of course you will hate him, right? For this very same reasons, we hate the shaitan. We know who shaitan is. We somewhat understand its meaning, the name, the meaning, the name of the shaitan, the word shaitan. It has a very negative meaning, something that has been distanced from mercy, something that has been thrown away far into the abyss of darkness, and so on and so forth. Yes, just by the name of it, we understand that we don't want to be allies with this being, shaitan. We don't want to be his friends. We don't want to be associated with anything that he does. Yes, and then when we learn more about his characteristics of arrogance and thinking that he's better than someone Allah created with his own hands, and not submitting, not prostrating before the Adam alayhi salam, and so on and so forth. And then you learn about the actions, and it's his actions as to the actions of destroying humanity, leading them astray, leading them away from what Allah wills for them and what Allah commands them. Then you know that this is something that we must despise, hate rather, and not think any positive, not harbor any positive emotions about such an entity, such a being. Yes. Likewise, Allah Azza wa Jal, He has His names and attributes. The more we learn about Allah's names and their meanings and what Allah is and who Allah is, and what He does, is His characteristics, and so on and so forth, His af'al, His actions, His behaviors towards us, His sunan, His sunnahs in the world, in the creation. All of these things will make us love Allah Azza wa Jal. And the love of Allah is the soul. It's a ruh. It's a life force of iman, tawheed. Without this, there's nothing. There's no iman, right? There's no iman. There's no faith. Khair. So when you love Allah Azza wa Jal, after you've discovered who He is, you understand that the only way you can truly qualify the claim of loving Allah is if you follow what He says, right? In kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni yuhibbukum Allah. If you truly are claimant that you love Allah, then follow me. I obey the Sharia that I have come with. Muhammad was commanded to say this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah will love you if you follow me, the Sharia, my way, the Sunnah. Tamam? Okay. So everything in the Sharia, beyond the initial introduction that Allah gives about Himself, of His rububiyyah, His asma wa sifat, and so on and so forth, everything leads to one very simple conclusion. You need to submit. You need to be humble, and you need to break your egos. You need to break your arrogance. You need to break your idols that reside somewhere in your mind, in your heart, and you need to wholeheartedly submit yourselves before Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? That's the conclusion. That's where all the lines merge, essentially. That's where everything comes together. Yes? So if everything is about Allah's obedience, then obviously Allah Azza wa Jal must have told you how to obey Him, what to do, what not to do, what to come with and what to avoid. Yes? So all of that essentially is encapsulated in the word al-hukm, or a command, okay, al-hukm. And in the Sharia, al-hukm essentially has 5 types, so we call them ahkam essentially. So all the ahkam in the Sharia, all the rulings, all the commandments that we have in Islam, the obligations Allah has given us, they are divided into 5 categories. Strictly speaking, there are only 2, and more technically, only 4, if you want to go a bit more. But the ulama have sort of divided them into 5 conventional types, right? So the first 2 types are of those things which are obligations to do. Okay, The next two are those which are obligations to avoid. Obligations to do would be, there was something which is wajib or fard. Okay, and obligation to avoid would be haram, something which is haram. Okay, something which is mahdhur, something which is haram, and something which should be avoided. Right, it's obligatory for us to avoid. These are the two major divisions. So things, obligations, the commandments of doing, and then the other two other commandments of avoiding. So obligations to do and obligation to avoid. طيب, inshallah. This is essentially where Allah created us. Yes. So when we understand this, we understand what we are ought to do as Muslims, right? What are our responsibilities as Muslims, inshallah. So is everyone clear so far? Are we all together so far, inshallah? Because now we are ready to start talking about the Fard al-Ayn and Fard al-Kifayah. Is everyone with me so far? Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Is everything crystal clear? I hope I've sort of connected everything from Tawheed all the way to this point, with regards to how Tawheed leads us to this topic of obligations, inshallah. Tamam. So, as we said, we have obligations of to do and obligations to avoid. When we sort of look at them, then we have obligations to do of two types. One, which are compulsory, as in obligations which are of the nature where you must do them, otherwise you'll be held accountable and you'll be punished. And others which are obligations of a lighter nature. If you do them, Allah will love you, Allah will reward you, He will raise your ranks, but He will not punish you if you avoid them, if you don't do them. Okay, technically we call them wajib or fard. That's the first thing. And secondly, something which is mustahab, something which is praiseworthy, it is something which is sought to grow more in love for Allah, so something that you seek love with of Allah. Okay, mustahab has the word hub in it, right? So something which is mustahab is something that you seek love of Allah with. طيب, so it's a means of seeking hub of Allah, hubbullahi azza wa jal. So it's an obligation which is of a lighter intensity, lesser intensity. You can, if you don't do it, you're not going to be held accountable. However, the Sahaba were, in terms of their action, both of them are the same. In terms of the implementation, the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'een, they would act on the fard just as they would act on the mustahab, right? And if they would miss for some reason the mustahab, they knew that they did not have to make up for the mustahab because it's not compulsory, but they would regret it, they would become sad. Okay, so it's not that just because it's not obligatory, as in not punishable, you can take it lightly and start avoiding praying your sunnahs and doing all the things which are not categorically obligatory of the first nature, which is wajib or fard, essentially. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second type was the obligation to avoid and not to indulge in. These are things which are haram or makruh. Haram is absolutely disgusting. Avoid it at all costs. Stay away from it. Don't even come close to it. If you do, there's a punishment that awaits you unless Allah Azza wa Jal wants to forgive you. طيب. The second thing is, it is still disgusting. It's still not praiseworthy. It's very, very despicable. However, if you do it, Allah will not punish you, but know that Allah will not love you because of it. Rather, you might go lower in the ranks that you are with Allah Azza wa Jal. Tamam? طيب, now. Okay, when it comes to the actions that we must do, okay, avoiding something is just the negative, right? When you do something, that is what ibadah is. Yes, in the positive sense. In the negative sense, leaving off which Allah has forbidden is not doing anything. It's just it's not doing something that you're not supposed to do. Right, so it's just staying away. So in essence, in ibadah, the asl, the primary status lies with the action and not lack of action. Sahih? So the positive thing is the fard, what you do. Which is why the ulama, when they write the books of fiqh and so on and so forth, they're normally written in the sense of, do this for tahara, do this for salah, do this for zakah, siyam, hajj. So do this, do. So the books of fiqh, they normally focus on what? The doing. And then as a discussion which is relevant to the certain topic, they bring in things which are absolutely haram and things that you should avoid, i.e. not do. Okay, but something which shouldn't be done is secondary to the thing which is supposed to be done. Yes, because lack of action is always going to be secondary to compared to the action that should be done. Yes, because a lack of something is essentially that lack of something, right? It's secondary. So basically, according to that, what is important is that you do the action. If you don't, if you're idle, if you are in a constant state of inertia, you're not moving, then you're only blameworthy if you don't move for the right reasons. If someone is going to hit you or bash into you and you don't move, well, you're the one to blame. That's the same thing with haram, right? If you are going to fall into something which is haram and you don't move, you don't avoid it, then that's something to blame. However, with the state in which you must do, that is a constant state. You must keep moving because you have to. This is the actual obligation. You have to believe in Allah with all the right conditions. You have to pray the salah. You have to fast. You have to give zakah if it's obligatory on you, if you reach a certain level, right? And you have to make hajj when it is obligatory on you, so on and so forth. Is this distinction clear, inshallah? So this is why the concept of fardul ayn and fardul kifayah is important, because we're focusing on the action, the doing of the action, as opposed to avoiding it. That's the first step. Every Muslim, every human being, once they've said the shahada, they're already in a state where they're not doing anything. Now they need to start doing something. Yes, that's so the first step towards the knowledge and taqarrub Allah and getting close to Allah Azza wa Jal is to start doing things. Okay, this is the bridge now that we're crossing onto our topic of today's discussion, which is fardul aini wa fardul kifaya, the obligations which are a must do. Okay, now that we understand that the purpose of our creation is to worship Allah, and to worship Allah we must do as He says, and those things which must be done by the very nature of the word done means we need to do them, right? And things which are to be avoided will come as a tertiary underneath those actions, underneath those topics. طيب, inshallah. So what we need to do has its hierarchy. Has its hierarchy, yes? So we have obligations which must be done, which must be performed. They cannot be avoided at any costs. Then you have obligations which are lesser, so as we have looked at. طيب, inshallah. So, because we are just starting our journey, we must understand that as Muslims, of course some of these things are already known, but we must understand that we must start by learning the knowledge that is obligatory on us and every single Muslim. Okay? You can't start with a book of fiqh like that. Ideally, you shouldn't. Or anything else. You should at least start off with things which are obligatory on every Muslim. Okay? So this is the concept of fardul ayn and fardul kifayah. This discussion will then lead us to studying the fardul ayn of Islam, which is compulsory on us. طيب, inshallah. So this lecture essentially focuses on giving you the foundation in the terminology of fardul ayn wa fardul kifayah, so that you're clear as to the obligations that we have upon us as Muslims. طيب. And then when we jump into the text, as we said, Durus Muhimmah li'ammat al-Ummah by Sheikh bin Baz rahimahullah, that text, it covers all the necessary knowledge that a Muslim needs to have, starting from the Aqidah and then moving on to Ibadat, which are compulsory, and then towards the end he also adds some things which are mustahab, which are praiseworthy, they're extra, they're not punishable, but they're something which are mustahab, inshallah. Okay, inshallah. Clear so far, everyone? So the obligation that is obligatory on everyone in the Sharia are of two types. Okay, are of two types: Ayn and Kifayah, or Ayni and Kifai. Fardun Ayni and Fardun Kifaiyun. Okay, we call this Fardul Ayn or Fardul Kifayah, or Fardun Ayniyun or Fardun Kifaiyun. طيب. Now, actions which are compulsory for everyone. The hierarchy within them is that there are certain actions which must be performed by every individual. Okay? The intention behind that is that this action is supposed to be performed by everyone. So the focus is on the individual and not the action being fulfilled. Whereas the Kifai, Fardun Kifai, is where the Sharia demands the action to be fulfilled. It does not matter who does it. Okay? This is in the simplest of terms, right? Inshallah. Everything that you need to do as a Muslim, that is compulsory on every single Muslim other than you, that is Fardul Ayn. And there, the objective is the establishment or the actualization of that particular action by the Ummah at large, generally. And then certain affairs concern the Ummah generally. They don't need to be done by everyone. Like, not everyone needs to be a doctor and so on and so forth. Yes, but if it is a need of the Ummah, and if someone fulfills it, that need had to be fulfilled. It was an obligation, but of which type? Ayn, Ayni or Kifai? It's Kifai because not everyone has to be a doctor. If the need of the Ummah is that they need to have, surgeons of certain part of the body, and some people fulfill that need as much as the need is for the Ummah, then that obligation is met. So the Fard Kifai is more communal and Fard Ayn is more individual. Okay? طيب, inshallah. This is more a very simplistic framework, so just a very simple explanation. Let's jump into some more detail. طيب. Let's look at Fardul Ayn. Bismillah. So it's important that you start taking notes now, inshallah. So from here onwards, the lecture will be more of a dictation. So I'll be dictating things which are important points, so you must make notes from now on, inshallah, okay? Right, the first thing we need to learn about Fardul Ayn is that most of the wajibat in the Sharia, they are wajibat ta'yin, and they are Fardul Ayn basically. Okay? طيب. But within Fardul Ayn, there are two types of Fardul Ayn. There are two types. There's a Fardul Ayn, which is clear. It's one action and that needs to be done. طيب. But there is another type of Fardul Ayn, which is mukhayyar, in a sense, it is open to choice. How do I mean that? Someone does a sin which needs kafara, and the kafara, like how you make up for that sin, Allah gives you options, and you're free to choose between some of them. For example, Allah says, فَكَفَارَتُهُ إِطْعَامُ عَشَرَةِ مَسَاكِينَ مِنْ أَوْسَطِ مَا تُطْعِمُونَ أَهْلِيكُمْ أَوْ كِسْوَتُهُمْ أَوْ تَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. Okay? طيب. So the kafara of a broken vow is إطعام عشرة مساكين, feeding 10 مساكين, poor people. من أوسط ما تطعمون أهليكم, from the mid-range, the average of what you feed your families. Not something terrible, like you wouldn't feed your family, watery oats where all of it is just water in starch and some oats swimming here and there. You would feed them some nice oats, right? Or you would give them nice dates, and so whatever you eat, you feed your families, whatever is your standard, the average of that. So feed 10 people from the average of what you feed your family. أو كسوتهم, or you clothe them, you buy them some clothes, or you free a neck, you free a slave. Okay. So now something has been done, a sin has been done, let's say, right? Now it is obligatory on every single person who does this sin. So it's obligatory on everyone. It's ayn. Okay, I'm going to define these terms in a second. I'm just giving you some examples here. It's compulsory on everyone who does this sin to then give the kafara. But the kafara is not one thing, it is an option. So you can choose between these three. Ideally, in the rank, if you can't do the 10, feed the 10 people, then buy them the clothes, and then if you can't, then do, and so on and so forth. Okay. Anyway, so this is just two important points. Okay, inshallah, that most of the actions in the Sharia, the wajibat, the fara'id, they are fard al-ain. Okay, most of the Sharia is focused on fard al-ain. Then within fard al-ain there are two types. One which is clear cut, muayyan, and the other is mukhayyar, which you have an option for, right? Inshallah. The sin that is obligated, or the reason why that obligation has come into being, might be one, but the way you respond to that obligation can be of two types. Either you have to perform one particular, very specific type of action, like when the time for Asr kicks in, it becomes obligatory to pray Asr, and then the prayer for Asr is 4 rak'ah. It's very specific. However, if you break your vow, a yameen, a promise, an oath, then, well, promise is different, it's an oath essentially, then you have an option to do these three. One of these three. You don't have to do all of them. Just, okay, inshallah. طيب. Allahu Akbar. Moving on, let's look at the terms now. Fard, of course, is clear. Fard is something which is obligatory. Al-ayn refers to specific, something specific, okay? And ayn also refers to an individual. So fardul ayn means the fard of the individual. Okay, fard of an individual. يعرف فرض العين بأنه الأمر محتم الوقوع okay ومحتم الوقوع. It is an action. The fard is known, the fard al-ayn is known like so as fard al-ayn, because it is بأنه, because it is al-amr, it's a matter which is al-muhattam al-wuqu', it must take place. It is absolutely surely going to take place, and it must take place. Okay? الذي لا بد, the one لا بد من حصوله, there is no way other than achieving it. It must be achieved. It must be achieved. It must be done. Okay? That is what Fard al-Ayn is. The Sharia demands certain things, and those things must be done. There's no other way around it. Okay, so that's Fard al-Ayn. Now, from which angle, from which perspective? From the community, from the Ummah, from the perspective of the Ummah, or the perspective of the individual? Bin nadhari, from the perspective ila, or towards, or from the perspective of al-fa'il, the doer. Okay? Al-mu'addi lahu, the one who is going to be fulfilling the obligation. Okay, so Fard al-Ayn essentially it revolves around the individual. Every person must come forward with these actions. Okay, every person must come forward. Every Muslim must come forward with this. They must do this action. Okay, it's compulsory on the individual. Right. أي لا بد من وقوعه من عين مخصوصة. يعني meaning لا بد, it's a must, من وقوعه, يعني it's a must that this must happen. لا بد من وقوعه. Okay, this must happen. وقوع يعني من وقوعه. لا بد من وقوعه, this must happen. There's no choice other than this happening. من عين, from a specific individual. مخصوصة, specific. عين, an individual. Okay, this must happen through an individual. ومن كل عين على حدة, and from every individual separately. ومن كل مكلف من المسلمين, and from everyone obligated with the responsibility of the Sharia from the Muslims. Okay, كالأمور التي فرضت على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, just like the excuse me, all the things which were obligated, furidat, ala nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, all the things which were obligated upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, faqat, just him, duna an tufrad ala ummatihi, without them being obligated upon the ummah as a whole. Okay, so those things which were obligated on the Prophet, they were obligatory on him as an individual, not on the others. Okay, other things which are obligatory on the ummah as a whole, they are obligatory on everyone as a whole. أي يعني أن فرض العين ينظر فيه إلى قيام كل مكلف به، كل مكلف به. There's saying that he's saying that أن فرض العين, that the فرض العين, what is observed in it is قيام كل مكلف به. What is observed in it is the action or the establishment or the actualization, qiyam, of every person who's mukallaf bihi, who is given the responsibility to do it. Anyway, so there's a bit of repetition here, but you get the point, inshallah, that fardul ayn essentially is an action in which the individual is concerned, if or not they will come forth with that action. طيب inshallah. مثل الصلوات الخمس, the 5 prayers, والصيام شهر رمضان, and the fasting of the month of Ramadan, والتخلق بالأخلاق الحسنة والسلوكات النبيلة, and adopting the beautiful etiquettes and mannerisms, والسلوكات النبيلة, and noble ways of behavior, وقيام مكلف واحد بفضل العين لا يسقطه عن غيره من المكلفين. This is important. If one mukallaf, one person, mukallafin wahid, in qiyamu, his doing that action, his qiyam of an action, his doing of an action, his fulfillment of an action, bifard al-ayn, with an obligatory action which is obligatory on the individual, لا يسقطه عن غيره, it does not render it fulfilled from others, من المكلفين, from those who are mukallaf, from the Muslims. It does not render it done or fulfilled. They must do it for themselves as well. Just because I have prayed my fajr or my dhuhr, it doesn't mean that my neighbor, his responsibility or his obligation of praying those salawat is now dropped. No, he has to do those obligations. Okay, so fardul ayn is an obligation which is individual, which concerns every individual of the society. Okay, and everyone is judged separately. Everyone must do it separately, on their own, individually, by themselves. And secondly, fardul ayn done by one individual does not mean that the obligation of doing that action on the others is dropped. It's not the original sin that once not the original, what I was saying. It's not the what's the Christian equivalent of the divine sort of the sacrifice on the cross. It's not like you do it and it just the obligation is dropped from everyone else. Everyone is is relieved of the obligation just because you have sacrificed yourself on the cross, so to speak. Astaghfirullah. But you get the point, right? I'm just drawing some similarities just to drive the point home. It's very important that you understand this now, inshallah. Okay, fardul ayn is something which is al-muhattam al-wuqu'. It must come into place, and it must be done by individuals. Fardul ayn looks at the individual, not the community. Everyone must do it. Okay, everyone must do that action individually and by themselves. No one can do it for you. Okay, and just because you've done it, it does not mean the obligation of that action from your friend or your neighbor or your family is dropped. Okay, inshallah. Is everyone clear so far? The primary difference between the meaning and then the understanding of fardul ayn, inshallah. Is this clear for everyone? Are we good to move on? Tamam. Right. So, salah and Sawm, and so praying and fasting, and then respecting your parents, for example, all of these are essentially obligations which are, obligatory on everyone, right? They are obligatory, and then they're obligatory individually upon everyone individually, right? So it's wajib alal a'yan. It is wajib upon individuals. طيب, inshallah. However, there's one point to remember before we start talking about Fadl Kifaya, is that a question might come to your mind with regards to, well, طيب, Fadl Ain is something which is concerned about the individual and the action that the individual does, and every individual, every Muslim, they must do those actions and so on and so forth. But surely it has a benefit on the community as well. So it does concern the community. It's not just it does not just concern the individual. Yes. So for this, the ulama, they reply, they say that the benefit of this type, in this wajib of al-ain, the asl, the primary, its foundation, its asl is, it returns to the individual, the one who is going to do the action. Okay, that's the primary, what do you call it, the foundation of this type of wajib. Okay, this wajib, it comes to the individual, it focuses on the individual. That's the asl. However, as the questioner has just pointed out, yes, when people pray, when people pray in the jama'ah, when the adhan is given, when masajid are built, when parents are respected and they're given adab towards, people are affected by it. The society improves as a whole. It becomes a happier place to live in, right? It fosters a better community, right? Because parents are respected, elders are respected, there's a bond, there's a community in the masjid, and so on. So salah leads to barakah in the community as well. Yes, so we say to them, yes, that is all correct. However, when we are speaking in terms of its technical definition, the fard al-ain, essentially, its asl is that it focuses on the individual in terms of its action. Allah wants from you that you do this. Allah wants the action to be done, either communally or individually. Yes. Fard al-ain focuses on the individual. The action, the focus here is on the action being fulfilled, the action being done. Allah wants the earth to be filled with salah and adhan and takbirat on the day of Eid and so on and so forth, and hajj. Allah wants these things to happen on earth, right? They must happen, and they're done by individuals. All of that needs to happen, right? But that focuses on the individual, right? And it's the individual who will do these things. And as a result of it, taba'an, as a follow-up of it, as a side benefit, or as a bonus benefit kind of thing, right? The benefit of it is experienced by the community as a whole. But the asl in terms of its direction, the direction of the fard al-ain, is towards the individual, not the community, even though the community benefits from the fruits of everyone fulfilling the obligations. And of course, we know when people start to become laxed in their observance of fard al-ain, the society disintegrates. It dissolves as a whole, right? Now, fadl kifaya, this distinction between the focus on the individual and focus on the community, inshallah, you'll notice this a bit more clearly in this section. So fadl kifaya, what is fadl kifaya? يعرف فضل الكفاية بأنه الأمر المطلوب من جماعة من المكلفين. يعرف فضل الكفاية. Fadl kifaya is defined as بأنه الأمر المطلوب من جماعة. It is an affair, it's a matter, it's a command which is demanded from a group of the mukallafin, or the Muslims who have been given the responsibility of Islam. دون أن يطلب من كل مكلف على وجه التحديد. Without it being demanded, يطلب من, from every mukallaf, على وجه التحديد, individually, specifically. Okay, so it's different from it's demanded from the community as a whole, not from the individual. Okay, وإن قامت به مجموعة المكلفين, and if a group of the mukallafin, of the Muslims, mukallafin, those who have been given the responsibility, yes, if a group of the mukallafin, they perform this action, which is a communal duty, سقط الإثم عن الباقين, the sin of not doing that action, it drops from the others. It was not like this with Fardul Ain, as we learned. Fardul Ain, everyone has to do it. You praying your dhuhr does not mean that the sin of the person or your friend or your neighbor or your parents, whatever, the sin of your parents or not praying dhuhr will be dropped. It will not be dropped, right? It does not work like that. They must pray on their own. They must pray their dhuhr or asr and so on and so forth. And you must do your own. But it's not the case with Fardul Kifayah. Okay, inshallah, it's not the case with Fardul Kifayah. Allahu Akbar. طيب. وإن لم يقم به أحد لحق الإثم بالجميع. And if no one does that action, that communal duty, the sin it encapsulates everyone. Everyone becomes sinful. If there is a duty that must be achieved, that must be done, that must be fulfilled, and no one does it, well, then everyone is in for a treat, i.e. punishment, or at least a grave sin that they have incurred, and if Allah wants to forgive them, then He's the most merciful. طيب, inshallah. What is the مثال of it? مثاله الجهاد في سبيل الله والأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر فالمقصود من فضل الكفاية القيام بالأمر المطلوب دون النظر إلى من أداه. So an example of it would be, yes, so al-ghusl, the ghusl of the deceased, if someone has died, the ghusl of the mayyit must be done. The Muslim has a right on his Muslim brothers and sisters. So if the Muslim brother and sister, one of them has died, then the others must stand forth. They must come forth to fulfill the responsibility of giving them the ghusl, clothing them in the kafan, and then burying them in a Muslim graveyard. Yes, and according to the Sharia. All of those things are the rights of a Muslim upon the community. If some people do it, not everyone in the Muslim community has to come for the ghusl of this one person. Yes, if some people do it, the obligation is removed. The obligation of it is removed from the community as a whole by the action of the doers. Now the ones who do this action, they get their reward for doing it. While for the others, it's just a sin that has been dropped, or it's just an obligation that has been dropped. They don't get the sin, they don't get their reward. The ones who've done it, they do get their reward, inshallah, because they're the ones who are doing the action. As I said, it's the action that is the asl, not the lack of action. Okay? طيب. Major examples of this, which are a bit more relevant in today's time, would be al-jihad fi sabilillah. So al-jihad technically is something which is kifai. Okay? If a Muslim nation is faced with an enemy and some people go to fight them, then this is kifayah. Some brothers have gone to fight, and inshallah they will meet the need of fighting the enemy and they will subdue the attack and so on and so forth, and the kifayah is done for the Muslim community. However, there are three states, the ulama, all the ulama, they are agreed upon this, that there are three situations in which this becomes fard ayn. So things which are fard kifayah, they can become fard ayn in three conditions, in three different situations. Of course, I'm speaking about the jihad here. Other things might have other situations. So jihad, for example, if it is fard kifayah, right? Let's say there is an attack, there is a need for fighting, and some group goes, then khalas, mashallah, done. However, if no one goes, then everyone is sinful. طيب. However, if the Amir or the leader of the Muslims, whoever assumes that responsibility, if he calls on everyone to participate, right, then it becomes compulsory. Ayn, fardul ayn on everyone, according to the command of the leader of the Muslims. طيب. Secondly, once you are in the battlefield already, then it's ayn on you. Everyone who's present, it's fard ayn on everyone who's present in the battlefield to fight and not return, and not run away from the battlefield. They can't. If they do, they will be turning their backs on Allah and His Messenger. طيب. And the third is when there is an attack and you have to defend yourself, like is the case today, right? As it has, to be honest, it has been the case since the 6th century, since the Crusades started, and so on and so forth. And people have just been ignoring it, and they've not been very serious about this issue. But jihad had become fard ayn way back, right? When the enemies, they started to plunder the Muslim lands and dishonor the Muslim women and children and our holy sites, and they dishonor the Messenger ﷺ, and so on and so forth. So all of these things have been happening for a long time now, almost 5 centuries, 6 centuries, in fact longer than that. Point being that in this circumstance, why is it fard ayn? Why has it become? It was supposed to be fard kifayah. Egypt, Jordan, some countries next, they should have just gone and helped their Muslim brother. It was fard on them to go and fight, because the people in Gaza, they're weak. They didn't have anything to fight with, technically, right? Or at least much less so than the enemies. They should have gone and fight them, fought the enemy, but they didn't. So fard kifayah, which was fard kifayah on the ones who were neighbors, Egypt and others, Turkey and Jordan, whatever. Since they didn't, well, the responsibility grew to others, until it has now, after a whole year, taken the whole Muslim Ummah under its fold. So everyone is sinful because no one has stood up for them. Every single person is sinful. Okay? Anyway, so the point is clear, inshallah. If someone stands for the duty, then he is doing two things. He is doing an act of khair, and he's going to be rewarded for it. And Allah is going to reward them for doing that action as they deserve to be rewarded for it. And actions are different in terms of their merit. And secondly, they are, mashallah, they're taking the sin away from the community. Okay? Likewise, commanding good, forbidding evil, and so on and so forth. All of these are examples of fardul kifayah. Building a masjid. Let's say you go to a far off land and there's no Muslim masjid in your area. It's fardul kifayah to build a masjid. Muslims must have a masjid to pray and hold their communal affairs and organize themselves as a community, right? For different things, for Jumu'ah and whatever the case may be, all the functions of a well-functioning, healthy community, they must be performed at the masjid. So masjid is a communal obligation. It's a need of the ummah in in a place where the Muslims are. And if a Muslim travels, a group of Muslims, they travel to a place where there's no masjid, then they should build a masjid. It's a fard kifayah. And if they don't do it, then all of them are sinful. Some of them, some group, let's say there's a town, there's a few thousand Muslims who live there. Not everyone has to build a masjid, but if some of them do it, the sin of not building a masjid will be dropped from the rest, and the ones who do it will get an immense amount of reward on the Day of Judgment from Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? طيب, Sheikh Muhammad Sulaiman Abdullah al-Ashqar, in his text Al-Wadih fi Usul al-Fiqh, he gives some important discussion on this. So I'll quickly read it from it and read that discussion, inshallah, for you, and then we'll wrap this section to move to the slight difference between the two, and inshallah we'll close the class with that. طيب. So the Sheikh says, ولكن هناك أنواع من الواجبات يكون الغرض من إيجابها أداء العمل من حيث هو عمل لا بد منه لمصلحة الجماعة في دينهم أو دنياهم. However, there are types of actions, واجبات, يكون الغرض من إيجابها, the gharad, the aim, the objective behind fulfilling them, or behind making them obligatory, and then fulfilling them, أداء العمل من حيث هو عمل لا بد منه لمصلحة الجماعة. Okay. So the objective to make something of these wajibat, the objective behind obligating such actions, such commandments, is to do an action, do an amal. لا يعني هو عمل لا بد منه لمصلحة الجماعة. From the perspective that that action must be done for the greater benefit of the community in their deen and their dunya. Okay, the objective behind legislating such obligations, right, whose primary goal is the greater benefit of the community in their deen and the dunya, such kinds of actions, such kinds of wajibat, obligations, like the washing of the deceased, like the janazah over them, praying over them, and burying them, and so on and so forth, and the other examples that we've talked about here. All of that, comes under this second category of wajibat. Okay. فإن المهم هو أن يوجد الغسل والدفن والصلاة. What is important is that washing the body and burying them and praying over them, all of that is done. وليس من الغرض أن يكون القائم بالعمل واحدا معين من المسلمين. And it is not from the objective or a must that it must be some specific person from the Muslim that must do it. There's no such objective here, but the objective rather is to do that action. Is that action must be fulfilled. If someone dies from the Muslims, they must be washed, they must be buried, prayed over, and they must be buried, right? That action is the objective, not that some specific individual must do it. That is not the concern behind communal needs, the things that benefit the community, right? Allah Azza wa Jal has obligated certain actions which benefit the community. The focus is the community. Unlike, as we said, Fardul Ain, the focus is the individual, not the community. Although the community may benefit from those actions as a side result, as a bonus, right, as a result of it, but the focus was the individual. For Fard Kifayah, it's the opposite. The focus is the community. The needs of the community are the focus of Fard Kifayah. Okay? It's not that an action must be done by an individual who is some specific individual. Rather, a specific action must be done. Doesn't matter who does it. It just has to happen. بل المهم أن يوجد العمل بذاته. Rather, what is important is that the action that is being referred to, that by itself needs to be done. لما فيه من المصلحة العامة, because of what there is in there is from the general benefit of the ummah. ويسمى هذا النوع واجب الكفاية. This type of wajib is known as the wajib of the fard of al-kifaya. The term wajib and fard are used interchangeably. It's known as the wajib al-kifaya or fard al-kifaya. Okay. ومعناه أنه يجب أن يقوم به من يكفي. And its meaning is that it is compulsory that someone does the action, fulfills an action, who suffices. Okay. فإذا قام به من يكفي سقط وجوبه عن الباقين. And if the one who does the action, who will suffice it, or group stands and does it, who suffices for that action, then that action, that obligation is dropped from the rest. وإن لم يقم به أحد أثموا جميعا. And if no one stands with that obligation, no one stands for that obligation, does that obligation, then everyone becomes sinful. Okay? So, he says something very important. This Fard al-Kifaya, okay, and this essentially, he says, جميع هذا النوع من الواجبات جميع الوظائف. Okay, all of the occupations, jobs, which are التي لا بد منها لانتظام حياة الجماعة الإسلامية. Without which there is no way that the life of the Islamic community will be organized, right? This category of Fard al-Kifaya, this is what it is concerned with. like medicine, like judiciary, like agriculture, like manufacturing, like administration, like fighting, jihad, like giving fatwa, ifta, like ruling, okay, al-wilayat, and so on and so forth. All of these things are fard kifaya. Someone has to do it from the community. Not everyone has to do it. Not everyone has to be a mufti. Not everyone has to be a wali, a leader, right? A wali, or not everyone has to be an administrator or a manufacturer or an agricultural farmer, and so on and so forth. But these are needs of the community. Okay, so this type of wajibat, fardul kifaya, essentially, it concerns itself with the general, all the generally speaking, all the jobs and the functions of the society. Okay, where someone has to take their place. Everyone in the Muslim community fits a certain space in society, and this space is fard kifaya, essentially. To fill that space is fard kifaya. طيب, inshallah, it's fard kifaya to fill that space, and if that space is not filled, everyone is sinful. Okay, inshallah, and so on and so forth. He says, وواجب الأمة كمجموع أن تهيئ الفرص للذين يقومون بهذه الأعمال العامة. And it is the obligation of the ummah, the community, as a community, that they provide such opportunities for those who may take on these responsibilities. Okay, like training centers, like preparation, factories, and so on and so forth. Anything that would prepare such individuals to take these responsibilities. Okay, if it is the responsibility, let's say if there's a need of the ummah, that we need more female gynecologists, let's say, right? A'udhu billah, it's becoming more of a trend now in our lands, right? That males are taking up the positions of gynecologists and so on and so forth, right? It was very, very rare back in the day, but nowadays, I once gave a lecture in one of these big medical universities in Pakistan, and there were all doctors in front of me, and at the end of it, no one asked any question about the discussion, the lecture I gave. It was a male guy. He says, I've chosen gynecology as my field. Why is that wrong? And I was a bit, I'm not sure how to explain to you why looking at the private parts of, women who are not related to you, it's not your wife, is haram. I don't understand how to explain that to you. Like if you have a degree, if you have an MBBS, and then you're a trained surgeon in gynecology, and I need to, I don't understand how to explain that to your dumb mind, right? I don't know how to explain that to you, and it became heated. Anyway, the point is that if the Muslim community needs more female gynecologists, because this is a female-only job, then the Muslim community must get together to create the best gynecology colleges for and train the sisters, females. Right? It's common sense, right? So anyway, this is just an example. So the Sheikh is essentially giving you all these examples that the community must prepare these opportunities to train such individuals who can take forth and sort of and bear the responsibility and to do the fard kifaya, essentially. Okay, so the ummah, they need to help them, they need to provide them the opportunities, and so on and so forth. Okay, fard kifaya, most of the time he says فإن واجبات الكفاية تحتاج غالبا إلى التأهيل والتهيئة الظروف المناسبة التي فيها يستطيع أهل المقدرة أداء أعمالهم. Generally speaking, واجبات الكفاية, they need, generally and mostly, they need competence and preparation, right, for specific duties. طيب. And situations in which and after which the person has the relevant qualification or the ability to truly fulfill the obligation. You can't just expect some untrained lady to come in and be looking at the let's say the I'm not sure, some, let's say, some disease that is a female only disease, let's say, I don't know, right? And I mean, you can't expect that. You won't do that, right? It's against common sense. You must prepare. If you want to allow women to come forward and you really want women to progress in society, then you must provide opportunities for them to train them to expertise and mastery and competence in fields where they're needed, as opposed to, beating around the bush and calling for equality and so on and so forth, and really making it's a very sort of chemistry word for it. You make it dilute, essentially. You dilute the need of the community by distracting them and saying, women should be taking the leadership positions and so on and so forth. I mean, there's nothing wrong with women being, I don't know, if they want to take leadership positions, but what's the need of the community? What does Islam need from them? Right? I'm not going to say, I'm not saying it's completely haram here, because every situation is different, right? And women can take on responsibilities in different situations. But the point is that this whole environment of this neoliberalism and this woke culture, it dilutes the needs. It does a great harm to the community. It fails to acknowledge where the community needs, right? So the concept of Fard al-Kifayah is very important, and it actually refutes this entire woke culture, right? The community, its needs are defined by the Sharia, okay? And then once these needs are identified, the next step is to then prepare the individuals who can then fulfill these obligations. Okay, so it's a communal task. It's a communal task. Very important. Allahu Akbar. Lastly, the Shaykh, he mentions a very important principle with regards to Wajib al-Kifayah. He says, sometimes Wajib al-Kifayah becomes Wajib Aini. Okay, sometimes Wajib al-Kifayah becomes Wajib Aini. When does it become Wajib Aini? Let's say, he says, let's say a land, it's urgently in need of 2 competent judges. Okay, and let's say there were 10 competent judges. So of course, if the need was for just 2, and there are 10 competent judges present, then 2 of them can take the space and the need is met. However, أما إن لم يكن هناك غير اثنين, if there were no other judges but 2, what do we do? فإنه يكون واجبا عينيا عليهما, then it would be a wajib aini. It will be an individual obligation on both of them to take that spot. Okay, to take that spot. طيب, inshallah. Likewise, a more personal example as we finish this discussion, inshallah. There's a lot to be said over here, and of course, we don't want to make this lesson any technical, more than it has already become, and the goal has been met, right? Inshallah. With just one more slide where we can compare the two, and then inshallah we'll end this section. All of these discussions will come in a much more detail, much more technicality later when we study the books of Usul al-Fiqh, inshallah. The purpose of this lecture was to bridge the gap from the first text to the next. Now that we are taking our first step towards seeking knowledge, the first thing we need to learn is Fard al-Ain. What are the obligations which are obligatory upon us as individuals? Okay, inshallah. And over time you'll realize things which are Fard al-Kifayah as well through the studies, inshallah ta'ala. But what is important for first and foremost is the Fard al-Ain. Okay. A more personal example of this would be our project. Why is there a need to do this project? طيب. For me, I see this as Fard al-Kifayah although there are many institutes offering specifically Islamic courses, specific Islamic books, Arabic programs, everything is connected. Disconnected, right? Different institutes do different things. They specialize in different things. طيب. Then you have universities. They have their faculties and so on and so forth, and they train people. Now, where's the problem? The problem is lack of competence, lack of taqwa, lack of courage, lack of bravery, lack of selflessness in the ulama. طيب. That's the first problem that we've identified. No one is taking care of that. Secondly, we find that there has been a very secular divide in the field of education. There is the religious education, which is the madrasa route, and then there is the secular education, which is the school route, where there's no overlap between the two. Other than, of course, if you're in Pakistan or any other Muslim country, you will definitely study some Arabic and some Islamic studies and something to do with Islam. Maybe perhaps you memorize some surahs in the class, and that's it. Very minimal, or hardly anything. طيب. So, as an ummah, as a general body of Muslims in the world, there's no education system that combines the two gently, that bridges the gap. طيب. And then secondly, on top of that, there is, even if someone succeeds to bring in a school which, let's say, it brings together the GCSEs and A levels from the, let's say, or BTEC, or the international baccalaureate from the French side, and then they bring together some of the madrasa subjects and Islamic studies and Darul Ulum subject, for example, together in a school, and they memorize the Quran. Perhaps to some degree, that will be in my mind, somewhat achieved, that goal of bringing those things. But of course, that goal of creating competence, and that goal of understanding how to create polymaths of the old, like the ulama of the old, right? That goal is still missing, right? And no one is creating, so you can combine two systems. There's hardly any, by the way. Even that is for it's a need of the ummah that we have education systems which combines between the two, a very competent education in the world and the religion together, right? There are hardly any institutes. I can think of a couple, or I can count them on my fingertips, but again, the issue again is that they are taking forth the same principles of education which have been given to them by the Western world, right? So there's no rethinking or revisiting the roots of our education in Islam. So there's a real need of revival of education upon the foundations of the Sunnah and Tawheed, essentially, right? And then, of course, based on that, a vibrant dawah, a restless dawah. So all of these things have not been combined. These things are connected, but no one is focusing on that. And all of these things are the job of it's a government's job. A government must be focusing on these things together, because everything on this scale has to be done by a government. But since the government is not doing it, someone has to do it. So it's Fard Kifayah. So it's a huge responsibility that I believe, inshallah, that if we can succeed as the team, the students and the teachers, and inshallah, we will have achieved a great service for the ummah, and we will have saved the ummah from a general calamity, a sin, on them, inshallah. Then that's a hope, right? What if people in the community want to do an obligation, but they are stopped or prevented by those in authority? Well, the sin will be on those who are in authority, of course. You have tried your best and you wanted to do it, and your intentions are clear. Allah knows what is in your heart. And then, of course, if you have been prevented, then Allah will ask those who are the ones who have stopped you from fulfilling your obligation. You will be free of the sin, inshallah. But of course, that doesn't mean that we become restless and become complacent. Just because we can't do anything, we should stop doing everything, right? There are many other things that we still can do. We can still donate. We can still send, our aid through different charities and so on and so forth. Whatever we can do, we can still make dua, we can still focus on our sins, leaving off sins. All of those things are things which will help, inshallah. So, and whatever, specific situation to any particular duty. Hopefully that's clear. طيب, lastly, الفرق بين فرض العين وفرض الكفاية. Just to quickly wrap it up. The difference between فرض العين and فرض الكفاية. يفرق بين فرض العين وفرض الكفاية بعدة أمور. You can differentiate between فرض العين and فرض الكفاية in different ways. بيانها فيما يأتي. This is how the difference can be seen as comes forth. يتعلق فرض الكفاية بالأمور الكلية المتعلقة بالأمور الدينية والدنيوية على حد سواء. The فرض الكفاية is connected to the affairs which are general, universal, connected to the affairs of the dunya and the deen, right? On a same level. على حد سواء, on the same level, the same way. Okay? ولا تنتظم أمور المسلمين إلا بأداء الفروض الكفائية. And the affairs of the Muslims, they cannot be organized except with the fulfillment of the فرض الكفاية, الفروض الكفائية, the obligations which are كفائية. Someone has to stand up for them. ولذلك لم يجبها الله سبحانه بقصد امتحان واختبار المكلفين وتكليفهم بها. Okay, there's a mistake here. I think it should be this. لم يجبها. So Allah has not obligated the fard al-kifaya, the actions which are fard al-kifaya, to be done by some for the community. They're not done biqasdi, with the intention of imtihan, testing you, or putting you to a trial, اختبار, of who? المكلفين وتكليفهم بها, and the burdening them with this responsibility, giving them this duty. It's not with the intention of testing you. Okay. وفي المقابل فإن فروض الأعيان يقصد منها اختبار وامتحان كل مكلف. On the opposite of it, on the contrary, the furud al-ayan, the fard ayn, essentially, what is intended with it is the test and the trial of every individual. Okay, generally. So the way it's the two are differentiated is the focus is the individual, and in fard ayn, that is fard ayn, the focus is the individual, and it's not strictly connected to the organization of Muslim life. طيب. On the opposite, fard kifai is something which is not directly connected to the individual, and it is to organize Muslim life, activities of the Muslims. طيب. So the intention behind fard kifaya is to organize the Muslims amongst themselves, right? To organize the Muslim community. It is not by, as a primary objective to test the believers, right? Although they will be tested and they'll be questioned and sinful if they don't do it, of course. In both cases they are obligatory, but the intention is different. Okay, the focus is the community. The community must fulfill certain duties to organize themselves better. So organization of the Muslim community, them being strong, them being organized, them being well resourced, all of those things are fard kifai. Okay, so the community is the concern, but for the ayn, it's the individual, and they are tested on an individual level, and the intention is to test them. Okay, to test them. But over there, it's the fulfillment or the actualization of certain duties. They must happen. Okay, so the difference of ikhtibar, and then the difference of trial and testing, and then the difference of the organizing Muslim life. Okay. Secondly, تكمل المصلحة من فروض الأعيان بتكرارها. The maslaha, the benefit, تكمن, it lies from furud al-ayan, from the fard ayn, the individual responsibilities, obligations, its benefit lies in takrariha, in bitakrariha, it lies in its repetition. Okay. فالصلاة على سبيل المثال, so look at the salah as an example. على سبيل المثال as an example. تكمن الحكمة من تكرارها بالخضوع والذل لله سبحانه. Its benefit lies in its repetition and the repetition of the elements of humility and humbleness before Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay. الذي يتكرر بتكرار أداء الصلاة. The two characteristics يتكرر بتكرار أداء الصلاة, that repeat by the repetition of the salah. Okay. So the benefit of fard ayn, it lies in its repetition. Okay. There is a greater hikmah behind it that is repeated again and again when the fard ayn is performed. Okay. But the maslaha or the benefit of fard kifayah, أما الفروض الكفائية لا فلا تتحقق المصلحة منها بتكرارها. Its actualization, the actualization of the benefit, it does not come with its repetition because they're not to be repeated generally. They are just to be done by the community for the need, and when the need is met, well, the maslaha, the benefit is achieved. But the fard al-ayn essentially is something whose benefit essentially lies in its repetition. So that's the other difference. Okay, its benefit, its maslaha, it lies in its repetition, like the example of salah I gave. But the fard kifaya, its benefit does not lie in its repetition; it just lies in it being fulfilled. Okay, inshallah, as a community. طيب. And the third difference is اتفق الفقهاء على لزوم إتمام فرض العين حين الشروع فيه. The ulama, the fuqaha, they are unanimous upon the luzum of itmami fard al-ayn. The once you've حين الشروع فيه, when you've started doing the fard al-ayn, like the salah and the siyam, so forth, it is obligatory to finish it. لزوم إتمام فرض العين. Okay, they have unanimously agreed upon the obligation of fulfilling the fard al-ayn once it has been started. You must finish it, otherwise you'll be sinful. ولا يجب الإتمام في الفروض الكفائية إلا في الجهاد وصلاة الجنازة. Okay, the only thing that is wajib to complete in the actions of fard kifaya is jihad and janaza, nothing else. Okay, for example, a group comes to pray the janaza of a person, right? They can't stop praying the janazah. Someone has to pray the janazah, right? So they can't run away from it. They have to pray it. طيب. Or they've started the salah. They can't just run away from it. They must complete it, right? They can't just drop it. طيب. And once you're in the battlefield, you can't run away from it. طيب. Or an enemy is upon you. You can't just choose to not fight. طيب. However, if you're building a masjid, right, and you start building a masjid, but you run out of funds, طيب. And then let's say the community moves elsewhere, or they move and there's hardly anyone left, or everyone leaves, let's say. Then there was the masjid not being fully built, for example, at that point, is not something which is going to invalidate the action, because the action was started, right? It was a need and they were fulfilling it, but when the need was, let's say, diminished, or the need was met by some people, others go away. It's not the same which you had in Salat al-Janazah. Once you're in it, you can't run away, you can't back out, and so on and so forth. Khair, inshallah. So these are discussions which are covered in much detail, with much more depth, inshallah, later in the books, at a much later stage. At this stage, it was important for us to be very, very clear on these two concepts of Fard al-Ayn and Fard al-Kifaya. And we must be very, very conscious of what things are obligatory on us as individuals and what things are obligatory on us as a community. Okay, and we should always ask questions about this certain things, right? So that we are not unaware or mindless about our duties as Muslims towards others and our deen. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, inshallah. So we've taken our first step. We've understood that Tawheed demands from you action, and action essentially is a positive thing. So you must do things, and that leads us to Fadl Ain. All the first step would be to know what are all the obligations that you must do. So it's important that we understood what obligations are. So that's what we've done today. Okay, understood Fadl Ain and Fadl Kifayah. طيب inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Before we close, any last questions? Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Any questions? Unless everything is clear. Okay, alhamdulillah. Is everything clear for everyone, inshallah? Okay, alhamdulillah. Hopefully the lesson was clear and beneficial, and everyone is ready to jump into the book, which we're going to be studying inshallah, and starting from next session. Tayyib, inshallah. I'll be posting all the links and everything will be posted in your Discord, inshallah. So make sure that you start to have a sneak peek into the book, prepare for the lesson, inshallah, read something beforehand, and we'll start the book from next week, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Allahumma taqabbal minna innaka anta as-sami'ul alim wa tub alayna innaka anta at-tawwabur rahim. وصلى الله على النبي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.